Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to put on our walking shoes and take a long walk back in time, 40 years back in time, to Dragon number 68 from December of 1982. This particular issue, this is the actual copy I bought back in 1982. This issue had a lot to do with being out in the cold and with weather in the world of Greyhawk. Very useful issue that rode around with my rule books for quite a while, pretty much till the Golden box set came out later, in about 6 or 8 months later in 1983, and then I went ahead and I went over to that World of Greyhawk system. That being said, I carried this guy around even for a while after that. There's some really useful stuff in here. We're going to take a look at the ads and all the fun stuff you would have had when you got home from the hobby store and opened this guy up. Also today, just a quick thing, subscribers, come on, channel's growing great. Let's keep it growing. Everybody who's subscribed, thank you. Everybody who's been on the fence, come on in. We talk about games a lot. Also, Patreons, thank you, my patrons, for supporting the channel. And I am offering a reward now, so take a look at the link below and take a look at Patreon and decide if it's anything you can do to help the channel grow and help me improve my electronics, that kind of thing. That's it for the commercial. Back to today's topic at hand, Dragon number 68 from December 1982. Dragon 68, on the stands 40 years ago this month. I bought this actual copy 40 years ago this month. Here we go. The fine art of Tim Hildebrandt. I always liked the brothers Hildebrandt, or even if one of them was solo on something. And a nice ad for MERP's Rollmaster, Middle-earth role-playing system. I don't think it was MERP's yet. Nope, just ICE Rollmaster. I tried it. I played a little bit under Arms Law, Claw Law, and Spell Law with the GM. Rollmaster is, you end up rolling a lot. Table of contents from December 1982. Some good articles in this one. Nice little editorial from Kim Mullen. And then Out on a Limb, which is letters from the readers. Featured creatures, Gary Gygax from 1982. These are just some various fungi, algae kind of monsters. If you're playing Zuggtmoy from Temple of Elemental Evil, these are really good ones to have. I was pretty excited when I got them, but I ended up not using them that much. Nice ad for the Logan's Run play-by-mail. And Hobby House, free lead figure with purchase of catalog. Send $1. Westland, Michigan. Nice ad for Cabal. And Be a Two-Fisted Fighter. This article changed a lot for our game. It's by the esteemed Roger Moore. And basically, it gave us a look at fighting two-handed for characters with higher dexterity. And there was a little precedent for this. Gray Mouser in Deities Demigods is said to have a 19 dexterity, so he can fight two-handed with no penalty. So here we got a really nice broken down article on how to do it. Nicely broken down. And based on the character's dexterity. If you have a 16 dexterity, you'd be -1 with your primary hand and -3 for your secondary hand for fighting two-handed. A dexterity 18 through 20, 0 your primary hand, -1 your secondary hand. We stay by that, except we changed it from 19 up. You have 0 primary hand, 0 secondary hand penalty. Staying with Gray Mouser as the example, I realized that he's a special hero, etc., etc. But it didn't make that big a difference in the power of the characters, and it was something nice that we adopted. We still use it. Have used it now for 40 years, and I have no intention of changing it. It works really well in our game. Nice ad for the Traveler book. End of 82. Wow. Out on a Limb. Some more letters from the fans. Translation and design opportunities. Japanese, your first language. You could translate D&D into Japanese 40 years ago. Season's greetings from Rel Partha. One thing I liked about a lot of Christmas ads back in the 70s and 80s was they weren't bludgeoning you over the head all the time with how much money you could spend. There'd be just a little ad here that's, Season's greetings. You can buy Rel Partha. Boy, I know I got a lot of D&D stuff, still do, for Christmas every year. So, it was a great time of year for me to get stuff. It still is. I know I've got one thing coming for D&D already, although I got to be surprised on Christmas morning. And here we have the Season's Greetings where you can buy this stuff. And here we are, the excellent Games Plus in Mount Prospect. That store is still there. In fact, we just had our Jump Point event there. Gen Con Miniature Open Winners. This is done by Kim Eastland. And we're taking a look at all the different winners for the paint contests. Some of this stuff is beautiful. I cannot paint like this. Never could. TSR's classic Dawn Patrol role-playing game of World War I air combat. Never played it. Just was nothing that ever really spoke to me. So we stay with a pretty good review of Dawn Patrol by Jim Quinn. Rapham makes Martian Metals 15mm traveler figures in Canada. Martian Metals, Rapham, RAFM, however you say it, is still around in one form or another. If you look on the web, you'll find them. Beg, Borrow, or Steal. 6 ways to aid Cal Areth's cash flow. This is a solo game. Dwarf Stars Barbarian Prince, and this is some tips for how to play that and make your cash go further. Daredevils Have Adventures by Fantasy Games Unlimited. Known more for space opera. FGU did some other games. Villains Vigilantes, I think, was another one. Thrills and Chills, Ice Age Adventures. This was kind of interesting. Playing in the cold, we didn't have a ton of rules yet for playing in the cold. This is one of the earlier looks. And I did use quite a few of the rules out of this at the time. Article continues. Now we go to OrcCon 1983, February 19th, 20th, and 21st, 1983 in Anaheim. So better get to Anaheim real soon because that con may happen. I'm kidding. That was 40 years ago. Silver Dawn. Would you ever dream of slyly searching for clues for treasure? It's ultimate play-by-mail again. Play-by-mail was big in the 80s. I never did it. Sorcerer's Scroll will be the first to cast these new high-level spells. We were pretty excited to get our new high-level spells, and unfortunately we're rather quickly disappointed. A lot of these spells had appeared in Module S4, which was fine, but most of them have to do with summoning creatures from other planes and then binding them into your service. There aren't a ton that are really usable day in, day out. Avoidance you can use. Dismissal, Dolar. A lot of these were just to bind something to your service. It's just something Gygax was into at the moment. Chain Lightning is an outstanding spell, as is Contingency. Ensnarement and Eyebite are more summoning spells. A nice ad for Judges Guild Darkling Ship. You have an Imperial Alert. I like that module a lot. I may feature that in my Traveler side someday. And then, nice ad for Grenadier models. I have a bunch of Grenadier figures. They come out every time we play. And Castles by Carol. This was interesting. It's just a little one page with a nice painting where we learn about a real world castle and some of the history of it. Again, this is well before the internet, so you didn't have access to a lot of this information. Lehman's Tiny Hut by Len Lakofka. The late Len Lakofka, unfortunately. He's featuring the Cloistered Cleric. A cloistered cleric would be referred to properly in Christianity as a monk, but because D&D had a monk of the Oriental style, they went ahead and they called them friars in this. And it's how you could do it. And some new spells. We used a few of these spells. A lot of them are offshoots of ones Gygax had just introduced, but still always glad to get new spells. And here we have the Wizard's Corner, Saskatoon's Fantasy Role-Playing Game Center in Canada. Your source, the Tin Soldier, everything D&D and Traveler. 24-hour phone line, wow. The Knights of Chivalry, play-by-mail again, and the adventure is yours with Dungeons & Dragons Fantasy Adventure Games. I always loved when TSR advertised D&D in the D&D magazine, because if I wasn't in D&D, I probably wouldn't be thumbing through the magazine. But, to be fair, there was the occasional thing I didn't know about. Again, pre-internet. What's in the Water? This is a lot of stuff that these charts come from Fiend Folio, the edition in 81, to a lot of the water encounters, which I thought was pretty helpful. And then we get some new creatures, some new beasties, which definitely did make appearances in various games of mine. And then we go to Boarding Party. Boarding Party is from Task Force Games. Depicts the actions of the cruiser CS Ulysses as they try to save their colonists from the Destructor cruiser. Okay, never read it, but Weather in the World of Greyhawk by David Axler. We used the heck out of this until the gold box came out, I think in the summer of 83. So for about 6 months, this was used. And even after that came out, I still use this as kind of a counterpoint to some of the stuff in that. Although a lot of what's in here was adapted to the gold box. But this was just so useful for the World of Greyhawk. We had nothing for the weather at the time. Make the weather an opponent to your players, and I've done it many, many times. The Wilderness Survival Guide also gives you a lot of good tips for that. And then Weather in the World of Greyhawk, we get a fold-out section. It brings all the charts together in a trifold. If you want to pull this out, you have a little freestanding cardboard screen. So I did play with a DM who did that. He tore this out of his Dragon magazine. Obviously, I did not. But this guy traveled around with me a lot, this issue. A lot of these issues of Dragon were in my regular stockpile, right with the PHB and the Dungeon Master Guide. So coming up, still finishing out the weather in Greyhawk, and then the bibliography of where he got the information from. This is the end of the new high-level spells. And always, we would adapt these spells immediately, but we would discuss them if there were things we needed to change or any kind of modifications. We would go ahead and we would do them. And a lot of these spells ultimately ended up almost word for word. I think all these spells end up word for word in Unearthed Arcana in 1985. So when Unearthed Arcana came out, there was certainly new stuff in there, but we were already familiar with a lot of the older stuff, sometimes 2 to 3 years worth of familiarity. Realms of Sword and Thunder from Empire Games. Is this another play-by-mail? It sure looks like one. Huh. And then finishing it out, and coming next month from the Sorcerer, the Thief Acrobat Split Class. Yeah, I will feature the Thief Acrobat in its own little video, and I'll use the one from Unearthed Arcana. And, well, that's all I'll say right now. So here we go. Gaming by mail can be nice if you're willing to pay the price. From Michael Gray, and this gentleman is telling us all the ins and outs, the good news and the bad news of playing by mail and how it could actually run into some money. Again, this was nothing I really did. And then Grimtooth's Traps. This is the second book, Grimtooth 2 also. And we created the play-by-mail industry. Flying Buffalo Incorporated. Never had their products. And now we come to the Deities and Demigods in the World of Greyhawk. I've done a video on this particular section already, so I'm just going to blow past it and just talk about the ads. The Curse on Hareth. 5 modular adventures for any role-playing system. Fantasy role-playing system. Game Master's Hobbies. Okay. In San Francisco, California. And then we go to Thieves World board game. I read Thieves World. I really gave it a try. I found it a little too grim for my tastes. I know that there are people out there that are going to be screaming and yelling that it's great and all. And that's fine. It just wasn't to my flavor. I found it a little too grim, unfortunately. Griffin Games, the miniatures case, $75. $75, let me tell you. $75 in 1982. I think minimum wage was around $3.35. You're making a good buck if you're making $6 an hour. To spend $75 on a mini case, that was something I never even thought about doing. Undead on Arrival from the Gravestalk, our newest fantasy tribe range. The Skeletons from Citadel. I love Citadel minis. Finishing out the deities, we go to Villains and Vigilantes ad. We did play Villains and Vigilantes till we found Champions. So about the first year or so I was gaming, year and a half, we were playing V&V, and then we found Champions, and unfortunately V&V I never went back. Fantasy Games Unlimited again. And then we've a nice look at standard divine abilities. This was really useful for us. Fantasy Unlimited, reversible hooded cape, $66 for a cape. Again, I've talked about what the dollar situation was. And why is everyone talking about the Oracle from Horizon International? Fast becoming a top magazine in role-playing. Does your Vorpal Blade go snicker snack, or does it just snicker? From Bandersnatch Leathers. Cast your own fantasy figures from the Duncan Company in Calvert, Texas. And this then the tail end of the Thrills and Chills article, which gave us some interesting creatures. I never really thought about spiders in a cold environment, but certainly there are, and it was kind of an interesting thought. Lords of Space, The Dreams Come True for the serious gamers from Gregory Enterprises. There were so many companies popping up at the time. It's funny because that time reminds me of where we are now with a lot of this, with all the online stuff. it's been fun to be involved in role playing and watch all this stuff explode. Solo scenarios come of age. High fantasy offers salvation for lone players. I've always acknowledged that I was very fortunate to have a group to play in back in the day, right? Really up until about the beginning of the 90s. I had 2 and 3 groups that I was gaming in. And I always knew I was very fortunate in that regard. And I consider myself very lucky to still have a gaming group. But I definitely could see why you would go for, lone player gaming during the lockdown. That was some of the stuff that I was looking at just to get a taste of it. Here in Illinois, we were locked down for a long time. We couldn't go anywhere. So we didn't play for a long time. I was fortunate in that my family plays, so we did play a few games during the lockdown. Just if an anniversary would come up, like my 40th anniversary of gaming was April 20th of 2020. My family informed me that no matter what, on that day we were playing a game of D&D, and we did, and it was a lot of fun. Borderlands sets high standards. It's a supplement for RuneQuest. I dabbled with RuneQuest a little bit as a player. I never got into it very deep. I only played a time or two. Yonkito Publications' new release, Man, Myth, and Magic. And new edition of Elric is best left to hard fans. Elric is another one. I liked Elric. I liked the stuff behind Elric. I found Elric kind of grim. I've read several of the stories, and I've always found them kind of grim. Game Town, Everything Adventure Games in San Diego, California. And Isgarth from Ragnarok Enterprises. You've always got a chance. Use your ability skills to determine success or failure. We'd always done a version of this. This gentleman just pulls it out into percentages based on your stat. But 5 times 15 is 75. So if you have a 15 in a stat, we would just have you throw a 15 or less in a D20. Why convert it when the D20's already done that for you? And here's the convention schedule. Look at it's growing. There's some conventions you got to get ready for. And here we go. Another just kind of mild. 'Tis the season for literary gifts. No smashing us over the head about how we have to run out and buy stuff or we're just terrible people. I like that. I like the lower key stuff. A lot of good books here. I think I read The White Plague. Frank Herbert's Tour de Force was Dune. I never really found anything else written by him, unfortunately, that compared to it. And some more inspirational reading. And Amazing Magazine. This was around for a while. I have 1 or 2 of them. Module Design Competition 1982. There's the general rules. Get designing. I started so many modules for these design contests and never finished one of them. I ran a few of them in our game, but I never finished them for submission. And the TSR RPGA, I say this every time I come across this. I have no idea why I didn't join the RPGA. I just didn't. I joined it in 2000 with the advent of 3rd edition because they were focusing so much on Greyhawk. Got some really nice freebies from them. Fantasia, fast-moving, easy-to-learn game of strategy. And first, Monster Movies. Now, Crush, Crumble, and Chomp, the Great Movie Monster computer game. Ha! Wow. Pretty cool. Do you know you could play games on your computer at your house? Yeah, 1982. Didn't have a computer. Hadn't even actually seen one yet. I mean, I'd seen computers, but I mean, talking about in a friend's house or whatever. And Wormy. Gotta love Wormy. And What's New with Phil and Dixie. And there we go. Christmas tips for Phil and Dixie. I always like that one. New releases from Raul Partha, the fantasy leader. Don't think I have any of these guys. And then Dragon Mirth with a little bit of seasonal humor there. So that's how he does it. Santa with the Bag of Holding. And here we have Middle-earth Fantasy Adventure from ICE. And then we're out with the neat little 3D play kits for AD&D, the action scenes. I don't think these did real well. I saw them in the stores a couple of times. I had a chance to buy one in the early 90s for $7. I'm kicking myself. It was the Orc Encampment, and I'm kicking myself for not buying it. But, oh well. These would have been very limited. Even then, I recognized they would have been too limited. But there we go. A look at Dragon number 68, 40 years ago this month. A little primer for the holidays. Nice cold cover there. A lot of cold articles in here. Just a little primer for the holidays. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this look at it. Yeah, please give me any kind of comments or positive criticisms, anything like that. I'm always in for. And that's it for today. So thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time on page 121.